And this is a Fox News alert. Airport suicide bombings rock the city of Istanbul, Turkey. The country's prime minister says indications once again point to ISIS being responsible for this attack. Now, the latest numbers put the death toll at 36, 147 wounded, but Turkish government officials say that those figures could in fact go higher. Also tonight, we'll have a lot of reaction to the new report released by the House Select Committee on Benghazi. But first, our own Catherine Herridge. She's in Washington. She has the very latest on the airport bombings in Turkey. The videos are chilling, Catherine.
Well, that's right. Sean, tonight the administration is deeply engaged with the briefing of the president, the attorney general, and the Homeland Security Secretary. These are all indicators the situation in Istanbul is serious and may have direct implications for security at American airports. All scheduled flights between the U.S. and Istanbul are suspended while investigators work out what happened and who was responsible. The FAA confirming tonight that a ground stop is in place until further notice. A government official said the attacks fit the profile of ISIS, which has stepped up its campaign in Turkey, going for international targets with an economic impact. A local Kurdish group has traditionally focused on the Turkish military. Let me draw your attention to this one piece of video. It's graphic, but it does show one of the bombers firing inside the terminal, shot in the leg. He then falls to the ground as the guard approaches and sees the suicide vest, runs, and the bomber detonates. The fact that the bomber came in guns blazing suggests to me, based on my experience, that the goal may have been to take hostages first and then use the suicide vest in a standoff. If he had only wanted to blow himself up, he would have walked into the terminal, straight to the passenger line, and detonated. With more than 30 dead tonight, ISIS is one of the few terror groups with the capability to build bombs of this strength. One of the striking similarities between Istanbul and the Brussels airport attack in March is that both explosions knocked the airport ceiling tiles out, telling us the explosion was strong enough to impact the terminal's structural integrity. To be clear, there's been no claim of responsibility by any terror group tonight, ISIS, al-Qaeda, or the Kurds. But the intelligence community has believed ISIS sent trained operatives into Europe in advance of Ramadan. Sean?
All right, Catherine Herridge in Washington, thank you.
You're welcome.
Donald Trump is reacting to the airport suicide bombings in Istanbul. Here is what the presumptive Republican nominee said at a rally earlier tonight.
We had another suicide bombing, Istanbul, Turkey. Many, many people killed, many, many people injured. Folks, there's something going on that's really, really bad. All right? It's bad. And we better get smart, and we better get tough. Or we're not going to have much of a country left, okay?
All right, here with reaction, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, as we look at these images again tonight, this is not the JV team, as Obama said. They are not contained, as he said, before Paris. It's Brussels, it's France, it's Orlando, it's San Bernardino, it's everywhere. And, you know, this obsession with not saying radical Islam, they're not workplace violence, overseas contingencies, man-caused disasters. How could they be so wrong so often?
Well, I think you have to understand that on the American left, there is an ideological, passionate commitment to a worldview which is out of touch with reality, but which they genuinely believe. In a sense, you're getting a reflection of the courses Obama took at Columbia when he was an undergraduate, and the whole notion of how the world should work according to left-wing American professors. Now, the problem they've got is, tragically, the world doesn't work that way. That we're faced with objective realities. We're reminded almost every week. You know, I tried to point out to people when the Orlando killings occurred, and there's this whole effort to turn into gun control. I said, wait a second. You had the second Canadian businessman beheaded in the Philippines during the same cycle that we're talking about. And yet somehow that didn't quite penetrate that maybe it's a worldwide thing. You had a number of young girls who are Yazdis who were literally burned to death because they had rejected sexual relations with ISIS, and somehow that didn't quite break through. And so you go through case after case. Now you have a new one. Chris and I have been, as you know, because we've talked about it before, Sean, Chris and I have been in that airport. It's a wonderful place. Turkish Air may be one of the greatest airlines in the world. They've done a tremendous job of becoming a modern country. And here are barbarians from the 7th century showing up with modern technology, determined to kill the rest of us unless we submit. And this is the core argument of this whole campaign.
But that's a truth that they're not willing to acknowledge here. And
right.
not only as evidenced by what they say, you know, man-caused disasters or trying to turn Orlando into gun control, but that's releasing Gitmo detainees so they can go back in the battlefield and try and kill more people. That's giving $150 billion to the #1 state sponsor of terror, Iran. You know, that's giving Mohammed Morsi, a guy that once referred to the Israelis as descendants of apes and pigs, tanks, F-16s, and $1 billion. You know, and these are the same people that want to bring in refugees in spite of what our CIA director, FBI director, assistant FBI director, special envoy to defeat ISIS all warn us that ISIS will infiltrate that population, and they're willing to gamble with the lives of every American. There is a disconnect here that is bordering on pathological.
Right. So the thing we've got to figure out, and the thing that Donald Trump has to figure out, and that Republicans at every level in the country have to figure out, is how do you draw the contrast between reality, what you and I are watching tonight tragically from Turkey, and the insanity of the Democrats? I mean, take, for example, the race with Russ Feingold and Ron Johnson in Wisconsin. Russ Feingold's a very attractive, very pleasant, very nice guy whose views of the planet are deranged. And somehow we've got to get across to people, this is a man whose economic, diplomatic, and military policies are going to get a lot of people killed. Now, that's politically incorrect. One's not allowed to say that. But I'm here to tell you, if we don't start telling the American people the truth, we're going to pay in dead Americans for our unwillingness to have a fierce, direct national debate.
Mr. Speaker, when you put it in its totality now, he was wrong saying the JV team. He was wrong saying they were contained. He wouldn't acknowledge radical Islamic terrorism. Add to that man-caused disasters and overseas contingents of workplace violence. Then you add to that giving the Iranians money. You add to that giving Morsi money. You add to that not securing the border. You add to that releasing Gitmo detainees. Honestly, I think at some point there's got to be a reality check. And if you add the refugees on top of this, that there seems to be no concern about putting the American people's lives at risk here. What is the reason for this lack of understanding of the world as it really is?
Well, I think that both Barack Obama and, to be candid, Hillary Clinton represent a hardline, left-wing worldview in which the problem is always America, and in which they cannot bring themselves to render judgments. They can't bring themselves to say the words Islamic terrorism or Islamic supremacism, which I prefer, because it would violate their core principle that you should always be in situational ethics. You should always be careful not to discriminate. This is insane. No. I mean, you're dealing with people who want to kill you, and you're telling us, as the Attorney General said, that the correct answer to terrorism is love? No. The correct answer to terrorism is to kill the terrorists.
Let me ask you this question, if I can, and we're going to have another segment with you. We're going to continue to run these pictures out of Turkey as we speak here. But the Benghazi report comes in today. We learned something. 600 times security was denied before the attack. During the attack, a stand-down order was given, and our troops were told to change their clothes 4 times, and we needed permission from the Libyans to actually save Americans, and that's what they were discussing. And then after, we were told to lie because Hillary told her own daughter, the Libyan president, the Egyptian prime minister, that it was a terror attack, but told us something totally differently. Your thought in the last minute we have in this segment.
That's very straightforward. Barack Obama, for re-election purposes, lied to the American people. Hillary Clinton, as the loyal puppet of Barack Obama, lied to the American people. There is no other possible explanation of what we have learned. They did it knowingly. They did it deliberately. They did it with cruelty that's unimaginable. And in her case, she lied to the families who lost loved ones. And we now know today it was an absolute lie.
Let me put up on the screen the email she sent to her daughter the night of the attack. 2 of our officers were killed in Benghazi by an al-Qaeda-like group. The ambassador, whom I handpicked, and a young communications officer on temporary duty with a wife and 2 very young children. Very hard day, and I fear more of the same tomorrow. She was telling us at the exact same time something very different. This was related to a YouTube video. It's breathtaking.
Look, the level of coldness and heartlessness and deliberate misinformation is worthy of Orwell's 1984. I mean, the idea of a human being who could be this heartless and could tell this kind of a lie to the families when she's face to face with them when they've lost a loved one.
Right.
It is frightening to think how deeply heartless she is.